You're just imagining things, Margaret cooed, patting my hand with mock concern. Her touch was light, but beneath it, I felt the weight of something darker. I sat at her pristine dining table, my head throbbing, my vision blurring. My blood sugar numbers made no sense. Wild swings despite my meticulous management. Something was wrong. Deeply, terrifyingly wrong. My name is Olivia Parker. I'm 34 years old, and I've been managing my type 1 diabetes for over 2 decades. I know my body. I know when something isn't right. And ever since moving closer to my in-laws 6 months ago, my readings have been erratic, dangerous even. Maybe you're just stressed, Margaret suggested smoothly, sliding a cup of tea toward me. All this obsessing over numbers can't be good for you. You know, my friend's daughter cured her diabetes with essential oils. I forced a smile, though my smartwatch buzzed another urgent warning against my wrist. Margaret had never approved of me, the woman who had trapped her precious son with a chronic illness. As if I had chosen this. As if I hadn't told James everything when we started dating 5 years ago. I've been managing my diabetes for 20 years, I said, keeping my voice even. I know when something is wrong. Margaret's lips tightened, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. Well, if you just try some of my natural remedies instead of all those harsh chemicals. I barely heard her. My fingers were already checking my glucose monitor again. The numbers didn't add up, not for the insulin I had taken, not for the food I had eaten. And then, as I glanced up, I caught something. Margaret was watching me. Closely, her gaze sharp, calculating. The first real suspicion had come 2 weeks ago when I'd stayed at her house while James was away. She insisted, claiming she worried about me being alone with my condition. My levels had been a disaster during that visit, but the moment I returned home, they stabilized. Then it happened again, at Sunday dinner, and now, after using the insulin she kept at her house just in case, the insulin she had insisted on keeping, my numbers were spiraling again. More tea, she asked, already reaching for my cup. I hesitated, watched her, noticed the slight tremor in her hand, the way she avoided my eyes. No, I stood abruptly. I should get home. I need to check my backup insulin. Don't be silly, she said quickly, too quickly. You just took your insulin here. And you know what the doctor said about driving when your sugar's unstable. I hadn't told her about my last doctor's visit. My smartwatch buzzed again. Another spike. Another red warning flashing across my screen. And then I saw it, the pattern. Every erratic reading traced back to one thing. Margaret. I've been tracking everything, I said quietly, pulling out my phone. Every dose, every meal, every visit. Would you like to see the pattern? Margaret paled. You and your gadgets. In my day, we didn't need all this technology to stay healthy. In your day, I said, a lot of diabetics didn't survive. I grabbed my purse, heart pounding. I had to get home, had to check my supplies. But as I turned toward the door, something caught my eye. The kitchen trash can. An empty glucose tablet container. The same brand I kept in my emergency kit here. Margaret stepped in front of me, blocking away. I'll walk you out, she said, too eager, too tense. But I was already moving, past her, toward the kitchen drawer where she kept my emergency insulin. The sight that greeted me turned my blood to ice. Empty insulin cartridges, glucose tablet bottles, their seals broken. One still dusted with fine powder, refilled with something else. What are you doing? Margaret's voice shot up an octave, sharp with panic. That's private property. Private? I turned, holding up an empty insulin cartridge. Like my medication is private. What did you do, Margaret? Switch my insulin with saline. Replace my glucose tablets with sugar pills. Her face twisted. I was trying to help, she snapped. If you just get sick enough, maybe you try real cures instead of all these toxic chemicals. Then James wouldn't have to worry about having sick children. The room tilted, not from my blood sugar, from the sheer, cold calculation of it. My phone was already in my hand, the health app open, displaying the undeniable proof. The spikes, the crashes, the deliberate sabotage. I've been documenting everything, I said, my voice eerily steady. And now I have proof. Margaret's expression hardened. No one will believe you. You're just an unstable diabetic who can't manage her own condition. Who do you think James will trust, his loving mother or his pharmaceutical-dependent wife? A strange calm settled over me. I pressed a button on my phone, stopping the recording. Why don't we ask him? I said quietly. And then from the doorway, a sound. The front door closing. James stood there, pale, his phone in his hand, open to the emergency alert I had set up weeks ago. The one that triggered when my levels became dangerous. Margaret's mask shattered. James. Margaret's voice shot up, brittle with panic. I can explain everything. I was just trying to protect you. Protect me? James stepped into the kitchen, his expression a storm of betrayal and disbelief. By tampering with Olivia's medication. By risking her life. I gripped the counter, my phone still recording, my smartwatch vibrating another urgent alert against my wrist. James saw the numbers flash on the screen and immediately moved to my side. We need to get you to the hospital, he said, his arm steady around me. Your levels have been all over the place for the last hour. No, Margaret lunged toward the door, blocking our way. She's manipulating you, James. She's faking these readings, trying to turn you against me. I'm your mother. I forced my shaking hands to steady as I pulled up my health app. Look at the pattern, James, I said, my voice low but firm. Every dangerous spike coincides with visits here. Every irregularity happens after I take insulin from the supply she insisted on keeping. James took my phone, scrolling through the data. His face darkened as he read my careful notes. Dates, times, symptoms, photographic evidence of my medication before and after it was in Margaret's care. The timestamps, he murmured, his jaw tightening. The photos. The pattern. His gaze snapped back to his mother. What did you do? Margaret's composure fractured further. I did what any loving mother would do. That insulin she takes, it's poison. I was trying to show her there are natural alternatives. If she had just gotten sick enough to try them. Sick enough? James's voice sharpened with fury. She could have died. Do you even understand that? Diabetes isn't some minor inconvenience you can cure with essential oils and wishful thinking. It's a medical condition that requires actual treatment. The room tilted, not from my blood sugar, but from the weight of her words, the full, awful realization of what she had been willing to risk. James caught me as my knees wobbled, his grip sure, steady. He checked my glucose monitor, his medical training taking over even as rage burned behind his eyes. We're leaving, he announced, his voice cold, final. And we're taking Olivia's compromised medication as evidence. Margaret went pale. Evidence? Evidence for what? For the police, I said quietly. Tampering with prescription medication is a felony, Margaret. Did you know that? She let out a high, brittle laugh. You wouldn't dare. I'm family. Family doesn't try to kill family. James shot back, already gathering the empty insulin cartridges and altered glucose tablets. Family doesn't swap out life-saving medication with placebos. I kept the originals, I added, watching her reaction closely. Untouched. The lab can compare them. My endocrinologist has already flagged my erratic readings. Margaret's mask cracked completely, raw desperation bleeding through. Everything I did for you, James. She trapped you with this illness. Any children you have could be sick too. I was trying to free you. Free me? His voice was ice. By slowly poisoning my wife. By playing God with her life because you refused to accept reality. Margaret's face twisted with something ugly. She's made you weak, she spat. The James I raised would understand that sometimes difficult choices must be made for the greater good. A sick chill ran through me. The greater good? I echoed, still recording. Like committing a felony? Like risking someone's life because you don't approve of their medical condition. James was already on the phone, explaining everything to my endocrinologist. Through the speaker, I heard the doctor's alarmed response, insisting I come in immediately for evaluation and documentation. Margaret's hands clenched into fists. If you leave with her, she said, her voice shaking with fury, if you do this to your own mother, don't expect to be welcomed back into this house. James hung up and met her gaze. For the first time, he truly saw her, not as the mother who had raised him, but as the woman who had nearly cost his wife her life. If Olivia had died because of you, he said, his voice hollow with restrained rage, welcome would be the least of your concerns. I took a breath, steadying myself. I saved everything, I told her. Every reading. Every text where you insisted on keeping my medication here. Every photo of the tampered supplies. The police will have everything they need. Margaret's expression collapsed into disbelief, then fury. You planned this? You trapped me. No, Margaret, I replied as James guided me toward the door. I protected myself. There's a difference. As we stepped outside, her voice followed us, desperate, shifting between threats and pleas. But James never looked back. His grip on me was firm, unyielding, as he helped me into the car. My smartwatch buzzed one final warning, another dangerous blood sugar alert. But for the first time in months, I knew exactly why my levels had been erratic. And more importantly, I had the proof to end it. The drive to the hospital was quiet, heavy with the weight of everything that had just unfolded. James held my hand the entire way, his fingers curled tightly around mine, as if he could anchor me to something safe. I knew this wasn't over. The fallout would ripple through our lives for years. But as Margaret's house disappeared in the rearview mirror, I felt something else settle deep in my chest. Vindication. The hospital moved fast once we arrived. My endocrinologist, Dr. Santos, was already waiting, her expression grim as she scanned my glucose readings from the past 6 months. The lab confirmed what we suspected. Margaret had tampered with my insulin, replacing it with saline. The glucose tablets she provided? Nothing more than sugar pills. You could have died, Dr. Santos said bluntly, looking up from my charts. If you hadn't documented everything, if you hadn't tracked your symptoms so carefully, this could have ended very differently. I swallowed hard, feeling James's hand tighten around mine. That evening we gave our statements to the police. Detective Martinez listened intently, her expression hardening as she played back the recording of Margaret's confession. The evidence was undeniable. My meticulously tracked health data, the altered medication, the text messages, and most damning of all, Margaret's own words. This is clear-cut medical tampering, Martinez said. Your mother-in-law will be facing serious charges. In the weeks that followed, our world shifted. James's family fractured. Some rallied around Margaret, insisting she had simply been a well-meaning mother who had gone too far. Others were horrified, reaching out to offer support, shaken by the realization of what she was capable of. Late one night, James's sister Elena called. Her voice trembled. I should have spoken up sooner, she admitted. Mom did something similar when I was in college. My friend had severe allergies and Mom kept insisting she was just being dramatic. She switched her antihistamines with vitamins. We all thought it was just Mom being Mom. The charges against Margaret were swift and severe. Multiple felony counts of medication tampering and reckless endangerment. But she refused to take accountability, choosing instead to paint herself as the victim. She set me up, Margaret wailed at her first hearing. She recorded me without my knowledge. She trapped me. Her own lawyer let out a weary sigh. No, Mrs. Mitchell, he said flatly. She protected herself, and given your actions, she was absolutely right to do so. Through it all, James never wavered. He cut ties with his mother completely, pouring his energy into my recovery and making sure I was safe, physically, emotionally, medically. We moved farther away, starting fresh in a place where I could manage my health without interference. 6 months later, Margaret accepted a plea deal. 2 years of house arrest, mandatory psychiatric evaluation, no contact with me or any of my medical providers, a legal ban on giving medical advice or handling anyone else's medication. It's not enough, James said when we heard the terms. After what she did to you. But I exhaled, feeling something settle inside me. She's exposed now, I said. Everyone knows what she's capable of. She can't hurt anyone else like this. We moved forward, rebuilding our lives. I became an advocate for medical autonomy, sharing my story with support groups. The more I spoke, the more I realized I wasn't alone. Stories of family members interfering with life-saving treatment, of medical abuse disguised as concern, were more common than I had ever imagined. My health stabilized under my own control. Dr. Santos helped refine my tracking systems, though she often reminded me, your attention to detail saved your life. Never let anyone make you doubt what you know about your own body. A year later, I received a letter from Margaret's psychiatrist. She wanted to arrange a supervised meeting as part of Margaret's therapy. I didn't hesitate. I declined. Some bridges, I told James, once burned should stay that way. He pulled me into a tight hug, no words needed. We had built something stronger from the wreckage, a life anchored in trust, in respect, in the unwavering knowledge that we would protect each other at all costs. My smartwatch still buzzes with glucose alerts, but now they're predictable, manageable. Each reading isn't just data, it's proof. Proof of my control, my resilience, my survival. Margaret tried to make my illness a weakness, a means to control me. But in the end, it was my knowledge of my own body, my relentless insistence on documenting the truth that exposed her. She wanted my story to end in tragedy. Instead, I turned it into a testament to strength.